This is But the Years Are Short, the podcast where mamas who are therapists share real advice for real families. I'm Meagan.
And I'm Katie, and we want to be your front porch community where you can laugh and learn with us about the beautiful, messy, overwhelming, hilarious work of raising kids.
Because the days are long,
but the years are short.
Good morning, friend.
Okay, so we just had our collaborative Divorce Texas spring conference, right?
Yes.
I know. And I was so glad that we got to go together because anytime we go to something together, we are the silliest.
Well, it's just very fun. We're very fun together. I mean, we're biased, obviously, but yeah.
I know we are. I think that everything we do together is more fun because one of us is always getting into shenanigans.
It's true.
And okay, so since I'm on the board for Collaborative Divorce Texas, we had a board meeting the day before the conference.
Yes.
And so we were there for the whole day. And so there is a campaign, a fundraising campaign. And it's called the I Made a Difference campaign.
Yes.
And so during the campaign, the whole thing is that you're supposed to donate an hour of your billable time. So whatever your billable rate is, they want you to donate that to the campaign.
Okay.
For helping Collaborative Divorce Texas through the year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I honestly didn't understand that. So I'm glad you clarified.
That's hilarious. Okay, well, as the communications and marketing chair, I feel like maybe I should help clarify that message, given that that's part of my job. So I'm glad I could help you with that. Anyway, so we're in the board meeting, and the fundraising chair is talking about how the board is expected to donate their hour, but they're also expected to for sure donate another hour worth of time, right? And it really is like it's super appropriate, right? Like we should definitely do that and all the things. And because I cannot make it 10 seconds without making a joke, I'm sitting next to my other friend and I said, they're going to bleed me dry. And she says, instead of I Made a Difference, we should call it the Pound of Flesh campaign. And then we both started giggling like so hard. She started laughing. She started like cry laughing.
Oh my God, like schoolgirls giggling. Like
yes.
legit.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. In the middle of this very serious meeting, I'm sure.
Yes, it was very serious. And so she's laughing so hard. She's got tears running down her face to the point that like she had to get a tissue. And yeah, And so at this point, the meeting has shifted to like people talking about how they're like going to shift out of their roles this year into a different role next year. And so one of the guys was like, I know this is really hard, but don't cry, he says to her. And so then that just like set us like rolling all over again, like laughing way too hard. It was ridiculous. So
you made trouble without me. Even.
I did.
We didn't have to
I
get together
know.
to make sure. Maybe you're the troublemaker, Katie.
Meagan, the secret is out. The secret is out. That was very silly. Anyway, it is all associations have fundraisers and all the things, and they're all really important. And so I don't want to undermine. It just was like, it was a funny moment. It was a funny moment. Yeah. It's like one of those things. It was silly. Anyway, so I mentioned Collaborative Divorce Texas because it was a funny story. I'm a board member of this organization, and it is because I like totally believe in it. But we wanted to talk about this approach to divorce because it's so healthy for families who are like trying to disentangle their lives from one home to two homes. And it touches so specifically on parenting.
Yes.
And I know you are, involved in, like, you're trained in this approach, and this is something that you believe in too. So,
Yeah.
From like a super high level, what drew you to this kind of approach?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be super honest, Katie. I didn't know about the approach until you told me about it. And so I worked and have worked for years with families in the transition through divorce, a lot of families in high conflict. And so when we say we're going to use like some terms today, so I want us just to clarify. So high conflict is this idea that through the divorce process, that it doesn't necessarily end with the divorce. That there's continuous conflict that exists between the two homes for extended periods of time, and that often requires legal matters to be involved. And so I was a part of that process for a while prior to learning about collaborative. And so for me, after learning about collaborative, I just love the support it gives to parents. And I think that that support that it gives to parents protects kids so much. And so I know we're going to go through a lot of different pieces of it, but it's twofold. One, I love the support it gives parents in helping them to restructure very intentionally by providing lots of education or not just like how do we the legal piece of how do we create two homes, but also like the piece of what should we expect developmentally from our kids at this stage in this time and how do we help them with all these little pieces. I just love that piece. And then also there's a specific role that I'm really passionate about is like the child specialist role, which that place their whole job is to give kids voices in this
Hmm.
process. And so I think that it does, after working in this avenue of divorce world for a while, it protects kids so much. And I know that that is something that both of us are very passionate about. What kind of drew you to it?
Yeah, so totally agree with everything you said. I think that I had done a ton of work with families, but either mid or post divorce that didn't have enough support around what their kids need. And so they were accidentally making decisions that were negatively impacting their kids. Right. And so, for
Yeah.
example, right, picking schedules for their kids that were really stressful on their kids. But once it had been picked and the family had like committed to it, trying to walk that back was like an act of Congress, right? Because there are attorneys involved and, people are taking advice from their attorneys, which they should do.
Yeah.
But as a children's therapist, you're like, oh, this is a problem. This is causing all of these issues for these kids and it's so stressful, but it's been done, it's been signed. And so now it's official with a court and everybody's kind of bound by it, or the kind of the traditional process that like each person hires an attorney and the attorney's job is to get them the best deal possible, like get
Yeah.
their client the best deal possible, creates its own conflict at like such a high level. Like, their kids inadvertently get put in the middle, and that's, not at all their intent, but they just don't know. They don't know what's
Yeah.
happening. They don't know that the choices they're making are doing that. And so, as a children's therapist, you kind of see it happening and are working to kind of undo the damage.
Yes.
And so that's the job that I had for a really long time. And so then I learned about this process and how we give families the education on the front end and teach them how these choices impact their kids, what the research tells them about child development, about the impact of different schedules, about the impact of new boyfriends, new girlfriends,
Hmm.
and like all those pieces, right? Like how we show up at extracurricular activities, just all of those things, and then they can make different choices that then are super healthy for their kids. So then we're not
Yeah.
trying to walk back problems or issues or damage. We just are moving about things in a healthier way, so that our kids feel really supported and loved and empowered and, kind of free to love both parents equally, in a really big way. And so that's what made me fall in love with collaborative. And so I think if we look at kind of the logistics of how it's different, so people understand what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So in the collaborative model, we have, rather than each person having an attorney who like stands in their corner and kind of strategizes about how do I get you the very best deal. So in the collaborative model we have, each person still hires an attorney, but those attorneys have been specifically trained to work together, um, to help figure out what is best for the whole family unit? Right? How do we
Mhm.
disentangle the finances, the parenting, the stuff, And then there's also a mental health professional. So that's the role that I function within to help keep the guardrails on. So when people start to feel really heightened or kind of hijacked emotionally,
Mhm.
get really frustrated or feel really scared. My job, what I do, how I spend most of my days is assisting people to feel calmer for meetings, to make sure we're staying really productive, keeping our momentum up, and getting through the process really efficiently. And then there is often a child specialist. And so this kind of gold within this process. So the child specialist, Megan, do you want to talk about that role? Because that's like what you do.
That's what I do. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I love this role because I think it's super unique to the divorce process. There's not really another place that you get this piece. And so what the child specialist job is to do is to meet with the kiddos and kind of understand their understanding of the divorce, their perspective of the divorce, as well as their wants throughout the process, right? And so it's the privilege of giving your kiddos a voice throughout this process. And so we talk about like they get a voice. It doesn't mean a vote. I know Kate and I have talked about it in other ways, but it's really giving parents and the mental health specialist a really good understanding of like where is this kiddo developmentally? What are they hoping for? What are they nervous about? What are they scared of? That then helps not just your mental health professional create that parenting plan with really good information and the parents create that. But I think it also really helps parents understand some of the hiccups that they didn't even know could be hiccups, right? So it helps them identify things that they didn't even know their kid was worried about. So then they can help give better understanding around and education for. And so it just creates a really powerful place for a family to start and to move forward really intentionally to restructure and support
Mhm.
your kiddos.
Mhm. Mhm.
What would you add,
Okay.
Katie?
Well, I was going to say, so something that we heard at the conference so there was a panel, right, of
Mhm.
6 couples who had gone through the collaborative divorce process, had these neutral roles. And something that we kind of heard over and over again from this panel was that had no idea how challenging the process of getting through the divorce was going to be. And that if they hadn't had these neutral roles, they don't know how they would have done it, right? So,
Mhm.
um, somebody mentioned that it was incredibly helpful to hear the research because they had their own opinions about what they thought was going to be helpful for their kids, but that really understanding the research about child development, what impacts kids well, was really helpful. And to hear from a neutral perspective how their kids were doing, what is currently stressing them out, and
Mhm.
how to make those shifts and to plan well for their future was invaluable. So we'll come back to that in a minute. I think there's one more neutral party that is really important as well. So that's the financial neutral. So so this person becomes kind of the central hub of information that is financial. So they collect all of the statements, so like bank statements, credit card statements, your mortgage statement, basically any assets or liabilities. And they create for you a marital net worth document so that both parties can really fully understand where you are financially. And then what we do after all that information gathering is done is begin to figure out options for, like I said, disentangling that and figuring out how you both are going to be best served moving forward. Who gets
Mhm.
what? How are we going to handle any of those debts? If there is a marital home, is someone keeping that? Is it being sold? How are we going to divide the equity in that? But that way you have a neutral source kind of managing that rather than, having one of the attorneys or the other attorney kind of be the person who houses that, which just doesn't feel as good most of the time.
Mhm.
So, anyway, I think the whole thing is set up so that everyone feels very supported and has all of the resources that they need. So Megan, in terms of the child specialist role, what kinds of patterns do you finding in your work with kids? So, for example, let's say in schedules, what kinds of patterns are you seeing that maybe parents are coming in with one expectation and then they're hearing from their kids something different?
Yeah. So I think oft want typically will choose equal time with parents if they get the choice, right? So they'll say like, I want to be with dad equally as with mom. And that's like across the ages, right? So that's from the little ones all the way through big ones. They do want equal time, and that often surprises parents. And that, like we said, the child specialist job is just to present information. The parents and the mental health professional get to decide, but that is one that often surprises parents, that kids do really want equal time with both of their parents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So, how
Mhm.
do you handle it when, because a lot of the time parents have this question like, well, if you're going to ask my kid what schedule they want, but I still need to be able to decide, how do you make that clear to them?
To the kiddos?
Hmm.
Okay, yeah. So I tell kiddos, mom and dad really want to hear, or parents really want to hear your voice. They want to know the things that you like and don't like. However, they get to make the decision. So I kind of do it as a candy store. Kids love candy stores, right? If you ever walked in the candy store with your kid, like there's a million things on the candy wall. And you may say, I tell the kids, like, you may say you want ice cream. I mean, the Skittles and Jolly Ranchers and M&Ms. You may say you want all the candy, right? But mom and dad eventually are going to say, okay, well, you get this many. And that's kind of how it works, right? And so it's like parents want to hear all the things from you, and they're going to make a choice, and they're going to make the choice with all the information that is best for your family. Because it
Hmm.
can't be about one kid or another kid or a mom or dad. It has to be about the family unit. And I think, to me, that is the other piece that I love about the collaborative process. It is about the family unit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's really true. So, I think one of the things that I really find is that coming out of this process, we tend to find families or see families coming out of the process in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so out of litigation or kind of the traditional model that you see on TV, where people are fighting for all of the things, we're going to saw a kitchen chair in half because we don't know how else to split it. Right. I think people come out not being able to have a conversation. They don't know how to talk things out. They don't know how to be flexible.
And because they haven't had a practice in it, right? Because the litigation
Exactly.
system isn't set up for that.
Right. Exactly. And it is set up to pit you against each other.
Yeah.
Right. Like, send me all the terrible things about this person so that we can use it against them.
Hmm.
And that is, you know, I think the real tragedy of that, besides the fact that it does some real damage, I think, to yourself internally. The real damage within that structure is to your, the byproduct there is that it really hurts your kids, or it can,
It
I
can.
think
Yeah.
it can, if we're not very, very careful. And it just doesn't give you any opportunity to learn how to have, really productive conversations with your ex spouse or their other parent. So, it's most of us go into a divorce not having beautiful communication patterns.
Yeah.
And some of what we do within the collaborative process is work really hard to teach, like, this is how we have a healthy conversation about swapping days, or this is how I'd like to do the holidays this year. Is that okay with you?
Because, Katie,
Go ahead.
you're not just giving them those scripts, right? You're sitting down with them, helping them walk through those conversations, helping them to regulate themselves so that every person has lots of practice through that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And what I continue to hear is that it is really helpful. So whether you use me or another mental health neutral or Megan or another child specialist, people tend to find the information and the practice to be really super, super helpful. Megan, what kinds of questions do you get from people before they jump in with a child specialist?
Yeah. So I get a lot of questions about like, why is this going to be helpful? Right. Which I understand. And I think helping parents to see the value in understanding all the information they're going to provide. Right. So why is it going to help? And what are you going to talk to my kiddo about? And so, I mean, we go through the parenting plan legit, right? So we go through all the ideas. Educate kids on schedules. We talk about holidays. We talk about things that kids love about holidays, special things that they are like, please, I want this to look the same. Like, and we talk about things that kids like in each home, their wishes, things that are hard with each parent and things that they love with each parent that they don't want to change. I think we spend a lot of time learning a lot about kiddos and their perspective on families. And so I think that is a big piece of what we do. And I tell parents all of that. And I tell them, like, this is your opportunity to hear your kiddo's voice and your opportunity to like help use this to create your plan so you guys can move forward with great awareness and great education. I think the thing that surprises a lot of parents is the holiday stuff. And so often parents, when we're sitting down and giving them back feedback, they're like, I didn't even know that they enjoyed that, right? Because especially when we get to like our teen tweens, and they're like, oh, we have to do the same tradition. They do like it, right? And so I think it brings a lot of peace to parents to have some of this information to move forward. So I would say those are the things I hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So when people ask you like, well, why can't I just ask my kids that stuff myself? Like I have a great relationship with them.
Yeah.
I can talk to them about all that. What are your thoughts about that?
I think my thoughts are, yeah, you probably could. And if your kids know you're in the divorce process, they're going to want to protect you and they're going to want to sugarcoat things in different ways, right? And not because they're being manipulative, right? It's not that at all. It's because their emotions are so high. They know your emotions are high. They're going to want to make sure that everything is okay as much as possible. That's what they're going to do. They want to smooth things over. So it's not that you can't. I just think it's really hard to get a big picture of all the things when we're doing it with our kids.
It's a
In a
really good
clear
point.
picture.
I think an additional thing that I get concerned about is what we call a loyalty bind,
Yes.
right? And so this is when, they want to, so like Megan said, take care of you, make sure you're okay. And also they're trying to take care of their other parent. And so they want to be loyal to both of you at the same time, which is a lot. And it's hard to do.
And so, yeah. And in their little brains, it's very hard to do.
Yes. Yes. So it's confusing and it's stressful. And so if we put them into a setting with a neutral person who is trained to gather this information for you, it removes that stress from them, which is really a gift. But you still have the information. So that part's really helpful.
Okay, Katie. So we've talked a lot about like kind of what my piece is, the child specialist, and we've talked like overview of kind of what you do. But tell me more about what do you feel like is the big piece of having a mental health professional as a part of your divorce? Why does it make such a big impact?
I think that the people who I hear from the most about how helpful it was are the ones who make use of calling me or emailing me outside of session. So, another thing we didn't mention is so to get through the process, we have this series of 2-hour meetings that include me or the mental health neutral, both spouses, their attorneys, and the financial neutral. The child specialist is a really contained role. So they meet with your children a few times and then they give you feedback. So it's very contained. It's just, a few touch points. And so the rest of us are on board for the duration of your process, however long that takes. Okay. So the people who I have had feedback from that have felt that it was the most useful or I've had the most amount of feedback from have said, have been the ones that have reached out to me between meetings and asked for help. Like, I feel frustrated about X, Y, and Z, and I don't know what to do about it. Or I'm having a hard time in interactions with my spouse when we're trying to separate our stuff in the home. How do we handle it? Or this hard thing is coming up in parenting and we don't know what to do. Or we don't know which sport to sign up our kid for. Can you help us? Those folks are always super thankful to have had the resource. And so another thing I'll say is that I call and check in before the meetings and see how people are doing. How are you feeling? Are you concerned? Are you worried? and then walk them through what we're going to be talking about in the meeting. What they need to be prepared to speak about. They talk to me about what they're worried about, what they're not going to be ready to make a decision about. And all of that is fine. And it's totally normal. And so, the goal is for people to all feel, kind of held.
Hmm.
Um, by someone who has walked, 250 families through this at this point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think in general, people are pretty surprised by how stressful it is to go through a divorce process.
Yes.
And so to have the extra support from someone who's trained as a therapist, licensed as a therapist, but is functioning very much in the solution oriented approach. How do we get from A to B in a calm way?
Yeah. Okay. So talk more about that because I do think that's the thing I kind of am curious about. How does it work as a mental health professional versus a therapist role lens in this space?
So we're definitely not doing therapy, right? Which I think gets people confused.
Hmm.
So what we're not doing is like when you call or if we have a one-on-one and you're a client, a collaborative divorce client, we're not spending a lot of time talking about how your childhood influenced how we got here and how the rest of your life is going necessarily, or all of those pieces. What we are focusing on is how do we keep your nervous system contained and calm and settled enough to manage getting through the next meeting. How do we conceptualize and start visualizing your future? How can we think about the course of your marriage in a way that helps you move forward? How can you use your attorney's skills in a way that benefits you? Uh, how do we start to think about your spouse in a helpful way? How is your parenting going through this process, right? So so like I say, it's like really contained. We're not talking about
Hmm.
your best friends. We're not talking about your relationship with your mom. We're not talking about any of these kind of ancillary things. So I think that's the difference is it's really contained and it's really focused on what we're doing and like I said, getting from point A to point B. My job is to help you get divorced in a really smooth way and help you move forward with your life in a way that serves you beautifully.
Yeah. And so it is like you did talk about skills, right? Of like identifying nervous system and communication and things like that. So it is definitely skill building and
Yeah.
solution focused. And so like
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful role that helps so many families.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And I am so thankful for the model. So a lot of some of the things that I do right in the beginning are teaching, like, these are really common communication mistakes. Which ones of these show up for you? Here are some like more helpful communication approaches. Here are some things we want to do around our kids. Here are some things we don't want to do around our kids. Who in your life is supportive to you? Let's start spending more time with them.
Hmm.
What are we doing to take care of ourselves? Are we working out? Are we walking? Are we writing? Are we painting? Are we praying if you're a spiritual person? What makes you feel like a whole person? Let's do more of that. So it's lots of like, how do we just hold you during this really challenging time? And then, when it kind of hits the fan, I'm here to help you figure out how to get your feet back under you and settle, so that we can get our brain back online for making good choices. So that tends to
Yeah.
be helpful.
Yeah. I think that brain back online thing, right? Because like we've said, this is a like getting divorced is one of the most challenging seasons in any human's life. It will be, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
really recognizing big part of your job is helping people to stay regulated so they can make very wise decisions or the wisest they can with the information they have, but with your brain on.
Yeah, with your brain on. Right.
With your brain
Exactly.
on. Yeah. Which is
Exactly. Yeah.
hard.
Because, we've talked about before when you're in freak out mode, right? We're not
Hmm.
accessing, we don't have as much blood flow to our prefrontal cortex, which is another thing that I talk about with people who work with me, right? If we lose access to that part of our brain, we cannot do good executive functioning, planning, problem solving. And we need that part. We need that part to make good choices for our kids and to support them well. So yeah, no, I'm super thankful for the model. I feel like it supports families really well. I love it when people come through. I think that the more that people know about this, like that this exists,
Yeah.
the better off, frankly, the world will be. Like this feels like a calling to me. And there is a whole community that is, doing this and feels very much like it's a life's work. And so I don't know. I think I just think it's a gift for families that have made it to the point that they feel like they don't have any other choice but to shift into two homes and reconfigure. So I would say, I love the work, and I feel like I'm hopeful that for people listening, if they know somebody who is considering a divorce, or if you're considering a divorce, that you share the episode. And we can put links in the show notes for how you find someone who
Yeah.
can connect you with an attorney or a mental health professional who can walk you through the process of getting started.
Yeah.
I have people reach out all the time to ask, how does this work? How do I get started? I meet with people for an initial consultation that I don't charge for, just to help them
Mhm.
figure out, like, does this approach make sense for me? How do I get connected? And I get them connected with attorneys all the time because that's typically the entry point.
Yeah. Yes. I know you're very passionate about it. You've committed lots of energy and time to it. And I think I just want to say, like, as someone who works with kiddos through divorce, like before, middle, and after, I love it because I think it protects kids. So whether you choose to use a child specialist or not, right? If you're part of the process, you are learning um, as parents, you are learning so many of the things, the mistakes that we would all make, right? But you're learning about how to protect your kids. You're learning skills to communicate with them. You're learning things just to be aware of. And you have when it's done well, you have a really great team that helps you contain it. So it doesn't have to be a stone in your kid's backpack. You have other places to put those things. And so I do think I'm a huge fan of it for that reason.
That's super good. The stone in the backpack thing. So I think if we think about, Megan, what does the research say about the impact of divorce on kids versus the impact of conflict on kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so I tell every family that walks in the middle of a divorce, and the thing is, like, what the research says, divorce doesn't hurt kids. Actual divorce process does not hurt kiddos, right? It hurts kids, meaning what creates challenges for them, what creates problems for them is the conflict. And so to me, one of the reasons I love collaborative is because it helps minimize the conflict, right? And so knowing that if we can hold that conflict, if we can get through that conflict, it is a conflict, right? Divorce is a conflict. If we can get through it with skills and resolutions and solutions to some of the big things, like that protects our kids so much because they don't have to see it and they don't have to feel and they don't have to carry it. And so to me, that is a huge reason of why collaborative is so powerful.
Okay. All right. So we hope this was helpful. Please share it with somebody who
Yes.
may benefit. And we love y'all. We are hoping for clear skies and calm hearts and settled nervous systems today.
Bye,
We'll
guys.
see you next time.
If you're loving these conversations, we'd be so grateful if you followed the podcast, left a review, or shared this episode with a friend. That's how we grow this little front porch community. And remember, the days are long,
but the years are short. While we often talk about mental health, this should not be used as a substitute for mental health treatment. If you or your child are struggling, please reach out to a local provider.